Now, my guest today knows all too well the importance of communicating God's word to people in their own local language so it can be understood and applied to their lives. Graydon Colville is from Global Recordings Australia. Great to have you, Graydon, on the programme. First of all, tell us what Global Recordings Australia is.
It's part of a global network. We've got operations in 20, 30 countries where we are recording and producing audio-visual materials to tell Bible stories, to tell helpful messages to people in their own language within their own cultural context. So we're a mission organisation that is trying to make God's word available to everyone.
And in that introduction, I talked about the importance of their language. That doesn't necessarily mean written. It means spoken language, doesn't it?
And for us, primarily, we're concerned about spoken language. It's probably the most effective way to actually get into people's hearts is through their own their preferred language, their spoken language,
I mean, there are examples of the gospel where Jesus read, like at Nazareth and other places, but on the whole, it's as he was speaking that people were captivated, weren't they?
Yeah, and Jesus was a storyteller. He told all kinds of great stories which got people in and really opened them up to the message that he was giving.
So what do you actually do?
What do? I'm the international director.
Yeah.
So I help all our centres around the world play nicely together and work well together. And
Which they always do, don't they?
Of course, we're a Christian organisation. We have to deal with conflict like anybody.
Yes, sure.
To try and help people think through their strategies and to do the work as well as we can. Because it's not just a matter of producing recordings, it's trying to produce effective content.
Great, and I'm assuming that Australia, because of its significant place, operates in this kind of region, is that right?
Our focus is predominantly into Asia and the Pacific, although we do support in various ways our work across the globe, especially in training and logistics and things like that.
And why is it important, the needs that you address? I mean, isn't this issue all finished with?
No, it's not, and most people are surprised when they actually hear about the complexity of language. But for most of us, we have a language that speaks to our heart. The language we dream in, the language we talk to our spouse in, for example. And one of the big issues is that when we try and share the message of Jesus with people, very often people say, well, we don't need it. We've got our own religion. It's a foreign religion. And it seems foreign because it comes through foreigners often and often in foreign cultural forms. So it's very important to try and get over those barriers and minimise those objections.
I think when I read as a young preacher that when I was first converted, those words that talk about reaching all the languages and peoples of the earth, I think the number of people that we're talking about, the number of language groups was a lot less in my mind than it is today.
Well, even when we started 70, 80 years ago, we thought there was about 2,000 languages. Now we count something of the order of 7,000 written languages.
Yes.
But because we deal in spoken forms, we talk about 12 to 14,000 spoken forms that may need recording.
Yeah, well, even in Australia with our First Peoples, it's an enormous number of languages, aren't there?
Yeah, and we have dozens and dozens of Aboriginal recordings, some of which are no longer spoken.
So media and technology has changed over those 70 years, and part of your challenge, if you're doing things in the way you've just described, is to keep up with that, isn't it?
Yes, in both the recording and the distribution side. So we try and identify appropriate technology which we can make available to our centres around the world and not change it too often because then we have to retrain and resupply. But the distribution strategy is what's interesting. When we started, we used to distribute 10-inch 78 records, and we used to manufacture hand-wind record players so that people would listen to them.
Because we know electricity in some of the areas where you go to.
And predominantly people didn't have electricity. So the technology went on, we turned our programs into cassette programs, and we manufactured hand-wind cassette players as well. And they were used in their thousands around the world.
How many people are actually paid employees of the organisation?
We don't have any paid employees. We do provide basic allowance within the Australian office, but basically people are required to raise support, just like a mission organisation. And part of that is because it's important that mission stays very closely connected to God's people in the church. So we don't pay salaries, we help people survive, and we expect them to raise the rest.
And they'll be employed but by gifts and support and spiritual commitment. So the international officers are here.
The international office is wherever I sit with my computer, really. We're a lightweight structure, and I communicate. And we've got a leadership team which is global, and we're scattered around the world.
Graydon, what's the biggest challenge looking forward?
The biggest challenge is continuing to make appropriate material for minority languages and supplying that material in appropriate ways. There's no silver bullet when it comes to communications. There's no technology that's going to work everywhere. Some people say solar players, for example, where there's no electricity, but people have to know how to put their solar panels out in the sun and recharge them and so on. Phones are, these days with the spread of smartphones, it's a major distribution strategy. Not everyone can afford that, not everyone can access the internet. And so we try to adjust distribution strategies into the different contexts. So the big strategy is just identifying those contexts and finding appropriate communication strategies into them.
Well, thank you for coming in and telling us, because we'll know now what that particular organisation is, and we'll also know what Global Recordings Australia is about and the challenges that we can pray for. And is there a website?
There is globalrecordings.net.
And we'll link that with Wesley Missions, and hopefully we'll talk and encourage people to.
And I'd like to mention the phone app called 5Fish,
Yeah.
which gives people access to gospel materials in 6,000 languages on their phone, which they can use to share the gospel with somebody or make available to somebody else.